Hey guys, welcome back to Pro Tools 101. Last week we saw the universe view. The universe view is something like a wide-angle view of your session. It's the area in your edit window that's just above the rulers but below your edit window toolbar that shows you horizontal lines, and all of those lines are actually representing the clips that are in your session on your tracks. Because it shows you the clips, it's not something that's available in the mix window. The universe view is available only in the edit window. And it can be resized too. So if you take your mouse in between the universe view and your rulers, you will see that you'll get a double-headed arrow on which you can click and drag to make the universe view larger or smaller. If you make it too small, it's going to go off. And obviously you can bring it back at any time from the view menu. So you can click on view, go to other displays and enable universe from there. Or you could use your mouse itself. So if it's not visible, just bring your mouse in between your rulers and your edit window toolbar. You can click in between those two and drag down to display your universe view again. Right? It's a cool feature. It shows you almost everything that there is and allows you to quickly jump from one place to another place in your edit window timeline itself. So because you get to see all the clips at once, even if you have a very small clip lying right at the end, which you may or may not have forgotten about, you can click directly over there and Pro Tools will immediately jump to that particular clip and show that to you in your edit window. Right? So that's what the universe view is. We spoke about two types of selections that you can make in Pro Tools. We have the timeline selection and we have the edit selection. The timeline selection is basically what you select, what gets played when you press the play button. So if you make a selection on one of your rulers and I press play, Pro Tools is going to play that part. Usually your timeline selection and your edit selection are linked. Your edit selection is, the region where any shortcut or any edit command that you use, that operation is going to perform at that selected location. So as I said, your timeline selection and edit selection are usually linked. You can unlink them. As we saw, one of the buttons under the zoomer tools and your edit tools is the link timeline and edit selection button. So you can unlink them and have a separate timeline selection and a separate edit selection. Your timeline selection can also be adjusted from the display that you have in your transport window as well, where you can enter the start, end, or the length of the selection that you have. And your edit selection, it can be edited from the edit window toolbar, where again you have the start, end, and the length selectors in which you can just click and type in a number. It's important to remember that when you do type in that number, when you click on, let's say, the start field to type in a number, if you're using bars, beats, and ticks, it's important to go from left to right. Don't go from right to left, because if you enter the ticks first and then you go to enter the beats, the ticks number will get reset, right? So you start with the bars, then the beats, and then the ticks. So go from left to right. It's just easy to remember that way. If your link timeline and edit selection button is on, you can change the selections on anywhere, either the edit window toolbar or in your transport window, and it's going to be the same thing because they're both linked together, right? Edit selections can be made by just clicking and dragging anywhere on your track, or if you want to make a selection, you can use your grabber tool, if you're selecting an entire clip, that is. If you're using your selector tool to make a selection, you can click and drag on the track. If you want to select an entire clip using a selector tool, double click. And if you want to select all the clips on a particular track, triple click on anywhere on the track using the selector tool, and it will select all the clips on that track itself. We also explored the tab key. The tab is a pretty useful way in order to move your edit cursor from one place to another place. There is a button in Pro Tools right under the zoomer tool called Tab to Transients. And if the tab to transient button is off and you have your your edit cursor blinking on a particular track, every time you press tab, the edit cursor is going to go from one clip boundary to the next clip boundary, which means if it's right at the beginning of a clip, when I press tab, it's going to go to the end of the clip. I press tab again, it'll go to the beginning of the next clip. Press tab again, it'll go to the end of the second clip, and so on. If your tab to transient button is on, every time you press tab, Pro Tools is going to look at the waveform. And whenever it finds a transient, which means whenever it finds an attack sound, it will move the edit cursor to the beginning of that transient, to the beginning of that attack sound. This works really well on recordings that actually have transients, that have sharp attack sounds, like your drums, your piano sometimes, your guitar sometimes, and your bass, right? So these instruments generally tend to have slightly larger attack sounds than, let's say, a flute or a voice for that matter, right? Vocals don't have a very sharp attack sound unless somebody's screaming at you, then it's different. But the tab to transient is a really cool way of trying to find perfect loops. I've used it most of the time to actually find the start and end of a loop so that, I don't need to guess, especially if my loop is not on the grid. Then it becomes easier to just use tab to transients and, just tap, 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 find the start, tap, 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 find the end. You can select as you're doing tab as well. So just hold down the shift key and press tab, and Pro Tools will make the selection as you press the tab key. You can make your selection in the other direction, or you can even move your edit cursor in the other direction by just holding down the Option key. In this case, the Option is going to do the reverse operation. So when I press Option and I press Tab, instead of going from the left to the right, it's going to go from the right to the left. So if I hold on Option and Shift, as it goes from the right to the left, it's going to continue making a selection as well, right? So that was tab to transient. And lastly, we saw all about memory locations. Where we saw how to make memory locations. There are a couple of ways. If you have your markers ruler displayed in your session, you can just click on the plus sign and it will pop up the new memory location window. If you have a full-size keyboard, you can just press the the enter key on the number keypad. You can't press the return key on your QWERTY keyboards, which means you will not be able to use this on a laptop without a number pad. But if you have a full-size keyboard, even on your laptop, pressing the enter key on the number keypad will bring up the new memory locations window. From the new memory locations window, you can create markers and you can have up to 999 memory locations in a session. I don't think you'll ever reach that number, but if you do, good for you. It's easy to jump from one memory location to another memory location. You will be able to see your markers on the marker ruler. You can just click on any of the markers and Pro Tools will take your edit cursor directly to that particular marker. You can see all the markers in a list in a window called the memory locations window. You can bring that up by pressing Command 5 on the number keypad. Again, not the 5 on your QWERTY side of the keyboard. So Command 5 on the number pad brings up the memory locations window. And you can see all your markers on memory locations there. Just clicking on any of them, boom, will take you to that memory location. Or if you're using a full-size keyboard, you can press dot, the number of the memory location, and dot again to quickly go to a particular memory location. So if I wanted to go to memory location number 6, all I need to do is press dot 6 dot on the number keypad, and Pro Tools will go to memory location number 6. I want to go to memory location number 25. It's dot 25 dot, and Pro Tools will go to that memory location. Pretty easy. You can make memory locations as Pro Tools is playing as well, which means as Pro Tools is playing, if you suddenly, if you want to identify a spot or you want to mark a spot where the bass comes in or something, close your eyes, just press the enter key on the number keypad. Pro Tools will pop up the memory location window, and you can type out the name and press enter again, and it will put the marker or the memory location at the beginning. That means exactly where you pressed the enter the first time to bring it up. That is where the marker goes. That's where the memory location gets created, right? So this is all that we saw last week. Today, we're going to take a look at some of the basic editing techniques we have in Pro Tools that will help us in editing our media. We're going to take a look at our scrolling options, something that we've briefly spoken about before as well. I'm going to show you how you can enable loop playback. There are a couple of ways in which we can do that. I'm going to show you all the different ways in which that can be done. We'll also see how we can configure our grid and nudge values. A nudge is something that you don't know. I'm going to teach you what nudge is. It's pretty cool, a feature. We're going to see how we can use all the edit modes in Pro Tools, and we're going to also do a little bit of editing in the different edit modes, because sometimes especially when you're trimming your audio or trying to move your audio, depending on the mode you are in, Pro Tools behaves differently, or the audio clips behave differently on a Pro Tools session track. So we'll take a look at all of them in detail as well. And lastly, we'll talk about fades, how you can make your fade in, how you can make your fade out, how you can make a crossfade, what are the shortcuts, and what are the different options you have in creating a crossfade or fade in, fade out, right? And of course, undo. I'm going to talk a little bit about undo as well, right? So let's start today by talking about our scrolling options that we have over here, right? So I have a session open over here. I'm just going to play back, and just a reminder, you can change the way Pro Tools actually displays your audio to you, displays everything in your session to you as the playback is happening. Which means if I wanted, my display to change when my edit cursor and my playback, my playback cursor reaches the end of the screen, I can request Pro Tools to do that for me. And it's an option that you can choose by coming up to the options menu. You go to edit window scrolling, and over here you can see you have 4 choices. We have no scrolling, which is what the default is. We have after playback, we have page, and we have continuous. Let's take a look at what happens in the default. Now, I have my scrolling option set to no scrolling, so I'm going to just play. I see my playback cursor moving across my tracks over here, and you will see as soon as it goes beyond my visible area, that is after bar number 9, nothing happens. It shows me a small blue arrow on my main ruler, which is telling me where my playback cursor is and what part of my session is playing, but it does not change what I am seeing on my screen right now, right? So this is what no scrolling does. That means Pro Tools is not going to change what you are seeing. And if you wanted to scroll, you would have to scroll by yourself as the playback cursor reaches the end of the screen. Some people like it. I prefer working like this. But some people prefer working in a different way. And that is when the playback cursor reaches the end of the screen, automatically update the screen to show you the next page, right? That's the page option that we have. So let's turn that on by coming up to the options menu, going to edit window scrolling, and I'm going to select page. And now when I play back from the same point over here, let's see what happens to my playback cursor when it reaches the end of my screen, which is after bar 9. There we go. It has updated my screen. It is now showing me the next page of the audio. So whenever my playback cursor reaches the end, Pro Tools is going to update and show me the next page of the audio that is on my tracks or on my timeline, right? So that was the page option. We have 2 more options. Let's go back over here to edit window scrolling. And the third option I want to show you is what we call after playback. In this option, Pro Tools is not going to change the display as it is playing. But when my playback cursor reaches the end of the screen and it goes beyond, it remembers, it will keep in mind where my playback will stop when I press the stop key. Which means when I press stop in Pro Tools, wherever my playback cursor was, that becomes the center of my edit window. So it's going to move my timeline to show me exactly where it stopped. But the thing with this is it does not put my edit cursor at the location where it stops, which means my edit cursor will be where it started, which is on my first marker that I have over here called verse 1. It's at bar number 3, right? So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to hit play. I see my playback cursor again. It's going to go beyond the screen. I'll wait till it goes till around bar number 10 or 11. Now you're asking me for a lift. And I stopped, right? If you look over here now, somewhere around bar 11 is where I stopped. So bar 11 has come to the center of my edit screen. But if there's no other indication that that is exactly where it stops. So I don't know exactly where it would have, where I press the stop key, but I know it is somewhere in this region, right? But my edit cursor is not over here. My edit cursor, in fact, is still at the beginning at bar number 3 where I started my playback, right? So if it is something that if you want your edit cursor to be at that location, there's another way to enable that, but this is not the way, right? But this is only if you want to have a visual reference of where you are going to hit stop, or when you are listening to your audio, if you want to identify a particular point in your song, you can press stop at that point and Pro Tools will show you where it stopped, right? And the fourth option is an option which I don't really recommend that much because it's going to take up quite a bit of your CPU power, especially your graphics power. And you don't want, most of us are working on laptops nowadays, so we don't want to devote extra power to unwanted stuff, right? And I personally, this is just my personal opinion, I find the continuous scrolling option an unwanted option. It looks cool, so if you're trying to impress somebody, it's okay. But it's not something that I really recommend because, as I said, it takes up quite a bit of your CPU power. Now, the minute I turned on my continuous option, you will see that now I have an entire line right in the middle of my edit window. That's actually my playback cursor. And in this option, my playback cursor does not move. In all the other three options that we saw, my playback cursor was going from the left to the right of my screen. But in this option, my playback cursor remains in the center of my screen. And instead, all my tracks are going to move underneath that. So when I press play, this is what's going to happen. Again, I'm at bar number 3 right at the beginning of my song, and here goes.
Waiting out in the parking lot after you get off your shift.
Right? So, as I said, it looks cool, but it is going to take up a little bit more CPU and a lot more CPU if your session is complicated. If you have too many tracks, it's going to take up even more CPU. If you're working on a small session like this one over here, hardly has any tracks, it's okay. You can go crazy. It should not be a problem. But the more number of tracks you have, the more intensive it's going to be for your CPU to render the graphics in real time as it is playing. So I don't really recommend it, right? But again, you can go back and you can change any option that you want. It's under the options menu. You come to edit window scrolling and you can choose any choice over here, right? I'm going to go back to the normal no scrolling option, right? That's just the preference that I like to have. Next, I want to show you loop playback, right? Loop playback is a really, really cool feature, and I actually have it enabled, and I know it's enabled because I can see a rounding arrow around my play button in my transport, right? So that's basically the indication for loop playback. This shows me that loop playback is on. If you do not see this round arrow, or the return arrow around the play button, that means your play button looks like this. This means that loop playback is not on. Right? As I showed you, it's really simple to turn it on and off. The way to turn it on and off is to hold the control key if you're on a Mac, or your start key if you're on Windows, and to click on the play button, and that enables loop playback. Right? So I can select a loop. Let's say I make a selection over here of 1 bar. I'm going to solo my drums track so that I don't get to hear the other things in the loop. It's going to otherwise sound a little bit noisy, which is not what I want. So I've selected 1 bar over here, and now when I press play, it should play back in a perfect loop. Cool, right? There are other ways in which you can enable or disable loop playback. There's a shortcut for it. The shortcut is Command-Shift-L, and it will enable or disable loop playback. So Command-Shift-L will disable it, and Command-Shift-L will enable it. It's a toggle switch, right? So the same shortcut will turn it on, and the same shortcut will turn it off if it is on, right? Or vice versa. If you don't remember the shortcut, if you don't remember you need to hold down Control and click on the play button, there is obviously a menu option as well. So you can come up to your options menu, and you can turn on loop playback from the options menu over here. Right? So you can turn your loop playback on or off from here as well. The region that you're selecting for loop playback will follow your edit or your timeline selection, or both if they are linked. And you can edit that, right? So if I wanted to increase my loop playback region, I can come and modify my timeline selection over here. And now when I press play, it's going to loop playback 2 bars instead of 1 bar. So you can modify your looped region after you've made your selection as well. Like we saw last time, how you can modify your edit or your timeline selection. You can do the same thing over here. The most important thing to remember is if you do make a selection and loop playback does not work, it means that the amount of audio that you have actually selected for loop playback is not long enough. You have to make a selection of half a second or more in order for Pro Tools to be able to loop your selection. Okay, if you want Pro Tools to play a part of the audio again and again, you have to make sure that your selection is at least half a second long, right? Let's try that out. So I'm going to change I have a sub time scale over here showing me minutes and seconds, but I want to make that my main time scale, right? So my main time scale over here is minutes and seconds now over here. I'm going to select only one bar to see what the duration of one bar is. And over here, it tells me that my one bar's length is 2 seconds, right? Which means half a bar length is going to be 1 second. And if I make it half of that, it's going to be half a second. I can see 500 milliseconds as my length. So that's going to be half a second. So technically, if I press play now, this will play back in a loop because it is half a second, right? So let's try that out. Cool. It did work, right? But let's go ahead and change that length from 500 milliseconds. I'm going to reduce it by just 10 milliseconds. I'm going to make it 490 milliseconds over here, right? So select the length field of the millisecond field. I'm going to make it 490, and well, you don't really see that much of a difference, but it has changed. My selection has actually changed by 10 milliseconds over here, right? So now when I press play, because my selection is not half a second, Pro Tools will not loop playback. It will just play the region once and it will stop like this. There we go. I did not press stop, right? It stopped by itself. But the minute I make my selection again to be 500 milliseconds or half a second, Pro Tools will be able to play back the selected part in a loop. Right? So always remember that half a second or 500 milliseconds is the minimum selection duration that you should have if you want Pro Tools to play back in a loop, right? If you do not play that back, if you do not make that selection that long, Pro Tools will just play back the audio one time and it will stop. It's not going to play it back for you. Cool. Let's talk a little bit more about the edit modes, right? We have seen before in our previous classes that Pro Tools has 4 edit modes, and they're visible to us right at the top left of our screen. We have the shuffle mode, we have the slip mode, we have the spot mode, and we have the grid mode. You can enable any of these modes by using your keyboard itself. So F1 will turn on the shuffle mode, F2 will give you the slip mode, F3 will give you the spot mode, and F4 gives you the grid mode, right? So we have 4 different modes in Pro Tools. What are these modes? Edit modes define how you can move your audio and how you can edit your audio on your tracks in Pro Tools, right? Let's start with the shuffle mode. Shuffle mode is called shuffle, well, because you can swap things around. In the shuffle mode, when you try to move a particular clip of audio or when you try to drag an audio clip in from the clips list to your track, Pro Tools does not allow you to place it anywhere on the track, right? I have an example for you over here. I see that my bass Hofner track over here has 3 clips. It's got clip A, clip B, and clip D. What if I wanted to insert clip C in between clip B and clip D? I have clip C in my clips list over here. I'm going to click and I'm going to drag it in. And the minute I actually bring it onto the track over here, you will see that Pro Tools is showing me a yellow vertical line. Pro Tools is telling me that if I leave my mouse now, that is where the audio clip is going to go. Let's try that. My mouse is actually a little after bar 104, but when I leave my mouse, it's going to place clip C at bar 103, right? If that is not where I wanted clip A, B, then I wanted C, and then I wanted D to be there, shuffle mode allows me to swap the clips as well. Which means if I click on clip C, I can actually drag it over clip D, and it will push clip D to the side and make space for itself in between clip B and clip D. That's what the shuffle mode does. When I am in shuffle mode, I cannot have audio clips overlapping at any time. If I try to overlap an audio clip, it's not going to work, right? Similarly, if I was to bring in clip C from my clips list, let's just undo this, right? If I was to bring in clip C from my clips list, instead of leaving it at the end of clip D, I could drag it in between clip B and clip D. And now you see that yellow vertical line right at the beginning of clip D. So Pro Tools is telling me that is where my audio is going to be if I leave my mouse now. But because I'm in the shuffle mode, it's going to make space for this audio clips, which means it's going to push clip D down, further down on my track and adjust its length so that, adjust its position so that clip C is going to fit right in between clip B and clip D, like this. There we go. So now I have clip A, clip B, clip C, and clip D all in the right order, right? That's what the shuffle mode does. Even when you're editing your clips, shuffle mode kind of dictates how you are going to move your clips or how the clips after a particular clip will behave when you perform an edit. For example, if I try to trim clip C by bringing my mouse to the corner of, to the edge of clip C, when I click and I drag like this, see what's going to happen to the space in between. It's not going to leave the space in between clip B and clip C like this. It's going to snap everything up, right? Clip A and clip B don't go back, but clip C and clip D are going to come up from the back, right? So shuffle mode does not like to have space in between. Even if I reduce it from the other end, if I trim my clip B from the other end like this, it's going to move clip C and clip D so that there's absolutely no space between any of the clips that are on that track, right? If space is already there on a track, right? Let's take, for example, I'm just going to put myself in slip mode, for example, now, and I bring in my clip E, which allows me to place my clip anywhere on the track, right? That's what slip mode allows me to do. So in slip mode, there are no restrictions on where I can actually place my audio clip. So if, let's move it a little closer so that it becomes easier to see. If I have space in between, now let's say in between clip D and clip E, I have this blank space. Now if I go to shuffle mode and I try to trim either clip B or clip C, it will maintain this gap that is in between clip D and clip E. Like this. If I try to restore clip B and I bring it back to its original size, it's going to push clip C and clip D down, and the distance between clip D and clip E will remain. That does not change, right? The change only happens, or the no space rule only applies to new clips or clips that were placed in this particular edit mode. If I try to move clip E now, it's not going to allow me to move it anywhere on the track. In fact, even if I try to move it slightly up in front, it's going to show me that it's going to snap to the end of clip D, right? That's how it works. That's what shuffle mode allows you to do. Even though I had trimmed clip C from the front, I can actually untrim clip C or open it back out, and it will push clip D and E back to make space for clip C, right? That's what shuffle mode does. And editing in shuffle mode works like that. So if I try to trim any piece of my audio, I need to be aware that it will affect all the audio that is on that track at, when I perform any kind of edit, when I perform any kind of trimming, if I am in the shuffle mode. So if you're working on a song and you are trying to trim a particular clip or a particular bar or a particular loop that you have on your track, if you are in the shuffle mode, do keep in mind that everything after that particular clip will be affected as well, right? So it's not a really good idea to edit your audio when you are in the shuffle mode. If you want to be in a mode where you have absolutely no restrictions to edit, the best one to be in is your slip mode. Because in slip mode, not only can you just move your audio clip anywhere you want, there's absolutely no restriction on that. You can even edit your audio or edit one particular clip of audio without impacting any of the other clips that are on your session or on your track at that time, right? The slip mode is the mode with absolutely no rules. It's like, do what you want, right? That's what the slip mode allows you to do, right? Third, we have the spot mode. Spot mode is another mode which allows you to precisely place your audio clips in particular locations. Like let's say I wanted my clip, let's start with clip C itself. I wanted clip C to be exactly at bar number 102. I can see that it is at bar 102, but let's just confirm because I did move my clips around. So when I click on it using the grabber tool, it will pop up a dialog box asking me where I want this particular clip to start. I can confirm it is at bar 102. I say okay. Let's move clip D to bar 103. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to say 103. I can see that it is at bar 103, but it's at beat 1 and tick 932. I want everything else to be 1 and 0. So I'm just going to type bar 103. I'm going to say okay, and that's moved to bar 103. Similarly, I want to move clip B to bar 101. I'm going to say 101, enter, and now it has moved to bar 101. I don't have to mention only the start. If I wanted or if I knew that it has to even end at a particular location, I can do that as well. So I'm going to go to clip A, and when I click on it, it's not only when you click, even if you try to move clip A, it's going to pop up the same thing for you, right? So when I moved clip A now, it popped up the spot dialog box, and now instead of the start, I'm going to say it has to end at bar 101. So I do that and I press enter, and my clip A ends where clip B starts, right? So that is your spot mode. The last mode that we have is what we call the grid mode. And the grid mode, when you are in the grid mode, basically snaps everything to these vertical lines that you see in your session. If you cannot see these vertical lines, that means your grid is off, and you can turn on your grid by clicking on this green grid button that you see over here. The number or the bars and beats number that you see next to this grid button is what allows you to set your grid value. Like as of now, because I'm using bars and beats, it is showing me bars, beats, and ticks, and my grid value is set to 1/8 note, which means I have 8 lines in between every bar. I can change my grid value. So if I wanted my grid value to be slightly larger, I could make it 4 bars or quarter note, and when I select it, I can see that now in between my bars, I have only 4 subdivisions. So when I try to move a particular clip in grid mode, it always snaps to these lines, right? Like this. I can, again, as I said, I can actually change that. So if I make it half a bar, now I have only 2 lines in between, or 2 subdivisions of every bar. So when I try to move my audio clip, it's going to move or restrict that movement to only those regions, or only those lines that are visible to me. Again, if you cannot see your grid, it's because your grid icon or your grid button itself is off. Make sure you turn it on and then change your grid value to whatever you want. You can have your grid value follow your main time scale as well, which means if I am using bars and beats and I want my grid to always show me bars and beats, which is basically what you want, you can tell Pro Tools to tell your grid value to always follow your main time scale. So if I switch my main time scale from bars and beats to minutes and seconds, I can see now that my grid is also changed to minutes and seconds, right? So now I see over here it's at 3 minutes 26 seconds, 3 minutes 27 seconds, 3 minutes 28 seconds. That is where my audio clip, where my clip E is. So if I move it over here, now I am moving with respect to minutes and seconds. And my grid value over here is set to 100 milliseconds, or 1/10 of a second, right? Changing my main time scale back from minutes and seconds to bars and beats will automatically change my grid value to be bars and beats as well. The grid mode actually has 2 unique modes. And if you look at your edit modes properly, you will see that the grid mode is the only one that has a small arrow next to it. That's because there's a choice. There is an option in your grid mode. And if you click on that arrow over here, you will see that there are 2 types of grid mode. The default is what we call absolute grid. And the second one is what we call relative grid. If you see the grid icon to be blue in color, that means you are in absolute grid mode. And in absolute grid mode, what happens is when you try to move a particular audio clip, I'm going to try and move clip D, it will always snap to the start of the lines that we see over here, right? So if I try to move it back, it is going to snap to the grid value that I have over here. Now, if I change my grid mode to relative grid mode, the color of my mode also changes. It shows me a purple over here now. And what relative grid mode does is it remembers the distance between the start of the clip and the grid, and it keeps that distance as you move a particular audio clip. Like, let's take clip E as an example over here. My clip E as of now is not on the grid. I can see that my grid starts over here and my clip E starts a little away from my grid. There is so much of gap in between the start of my grid and the start of the clip. Pro Tools will maintain that gap. So if I try to actually move my clip E from here to 1 bar to the right, you will see that it actually maintains the gap between the grid line and the start of the audio clip itself. That's what relative grid does, right? It makes your movements with respect to the size of the grid that you have. That means I'm moving with respect to my grid value, which is set to be half a note over here now, but it's relative to the position, to its position on the grid, which means if it's a little off, offbeat, you can maintain that offbeat when you're trying to move your loop, right? That's actually what it is for. If somebody's played a drum loop that's slightly offbeat and you want to move it down the grid, you can maintain that offbeat and still move it down the grid. You can change your edit mode when you are in the grid mode itself. You can change the type of grid mode that you have by pressing the F4 key continuously. So F4 will change to absolute, F4 again will change to relative grid as well, right? So you have your shuffle mode, slip mode, spot mode, and your grid mode. Usually, people prefer to be in their slip mode. If you're composing music, people prefer to be in their grid mode because you're usually working with bars and beats. You want everything to make sure, you want to make sure that everything is perfect with respect to the timing of your song. But there will be times when you want the flexibility of moving your clips, but whenever you make a selection, you want your selection, you want your choices to be perfectly on the beat, right? In which case, you can enable something known as snap to grid in Pro Tools. I am in my slip mode. If I hold down my shift key and I click on the grid icon that I have over here, Pro Tools enables both of these modes at the same time. How does it work? Sounds confusing. Well, yeah, it is. The way it works is you are not restricted when it comes to the movement of your audio clips or movement of your clips basically in Pro Tools. So if I try to move clip E now, there's absolutely no restriction. It's not going to snap to the grid. I don't need to force myself to be on the grid. Similarly, for this 3-bar loop that I have over here, I can move it anywhere I want, anywhere I want. But when I try to make a selection, my selection is going to be with respect to my bar. So if I wanted to actually select a perfect bar now, I can just select and my selection will always be a perfect bar. That means my selection is going to snap to the grid. I cannot select in between two grids. I cannot stop my selection in between two grids. So my selection, every time I click and drag and try to make a selection, it's going to be with respect to the grid value that I have adjusted over here, right? This is snap to grid. It's pretty useful, especially when you're editing your audio. You want the flexibility of moving your stuff. You have your tempo, everything is set. Now you just want to select a particular bar and move it down. You can be in the snap to grid mode, right? So in whatever mode you are, just hold shift and you can enable it by selecting this grid mode after holding down the shift key. You can use your keyboard shortcuts as well, which is what I did just now. So I was F2 for slip mode, shift F4, and I have selected both my modes over here. This is called snap to grid. Oh, one thing I forgot to tell you, when you are in your relative grid mode, I press my F4 key 2 times to get to relative grid. When I am in my relative grid mode over here, and let's say I copy or I cut this audio from here to paste it 1 bar later, right? So I'm just going to do Command X or Control X if you're on the PC. And let's say I just wanted to move this particular audio 1 bar down. If I click over here and I do a paste now, where do you think the audio is going to paste? Is my clip E going to start exactly where my edit cursor is blinking? Or is it actually going to maintain the relative position with respect to the grid? It will maintain its position. So if I do Command V or Control V, you will see that it is going to maintain its position with respect to the grid itself, right? So the distance between the grid line and the start of the clip is maintained, right? It will always maintain that. It will always remember that. So if you are in the relative grid, if you're not in the relative grid, it works differently, right? So let's go to absolute grid over here now. Again, I'm going to cut this audio clip. I'm going to select the top of the bar and I'm going to press paste, and it will paste it exactly where I asked it to paste, or exactly where my edit cursor was, or is rather, at this time, right? So that's the difference between copying and pasting when you are in absolute grid and relative grid. Whatever you do in the relative grid mode, it will maintain its position. It will remember its distance, its relative position from the start of your grid, right? So do keep that in mind. Right under the grid mode, actually, we see another number. We see another bar value that we see over here, and it's called nudge. Nudge is a really, really cool feature in Pro Tools. And if you see, I mean, my nudge value and my grid value, they're not the same. They're not linked at all. And this is a question that they ask you in the exam sometimes just to confuse you. That do my nudge value and my grid value, do they have to be the same always? Are they locked? Can it be different at any time? The answer is yes, it can be different. Your nudge value has nothing to do with your grid value. They're two completely independent. In fact, you can actually change if you want your nudge value to not be bars and beats, and if I wanted my nudge value to be with respect to minutes and seconds, I can do that as well. So I can nudge in minutes and seconds when my grid is actually showing me bars and beats. I understand you must be wondering what the hell nudge is, but here's what it is. Let's go back to bars and beats just so that I can give you a clearer example. What nudge does is it moves your audio for you using your keyboard shortcuts. Now, if I have set my nudge value to be 1 bar, that means I can move my audio, my selected audio, 1 bar at a time to the left or to the right. And I do that by pressing the plus and the minus key on my number keypad, right? Not on your QWERTY keyboard, on your number keypad. So if I press the plus, it's going to go 1 bar to the right. If I press the minus, it's going to go 1 bar to the left. I press minus again, it's moving 1 bar to the left. This movement is not restricted only to audio clips. I can actually move time as well. So if I have made a selection of just time on my track over here, I can move this selection up or down as well using the minus key or the plus key at any time, right? So that's what nudge does. I am nudging my selection. Let's say I have made a selection from here to here. Now I'm going to reduce my nudge selection to, let's go with 1/8 note so that I'm not moving that much at a time. If I try to do my nudge now, it's going to move not only the time, but it's going to move all of the audio that is inside as well, right? Actually, let me give you a slightly better example. I'm going to choose 3 bars of audio over here, 3 bars of time over here, and there's no audio inside. Now, if I keep nudging to the left, I see that I have clip 1 on this track over here. So if I keep nudging my time to the left, eventually the whole of clip 1 is going to be inside my time, like this. Now, if I continue to nudge, is it going to move my audio clip, or is it going to leave my audio clip and only nudge the time? It will move my audio clip. So if I continue to nudge to the left, my audio clip, because my audio clip is completely inside the selection, it begins to move with the selection. You can bypass that, obviously. So if I did not want my audio to move, let's go back. Let's move this over here. I'm going to remake the selection of 3 bars. If I did not want my audio to move as I did my nudge, all you need to do is hold down the shift key and then do your nudge. So now I'm holding down my shift key and I'm doing my nudge, and you will see that my nudge of my timing is going to go over my audio clip, right? It's not going to touch my audio clip. It's going to ignore the audio that is on that track, and it's going to only move my time. This is useful when you're trying to make a selection. You selected a one bar and then you realize, I selected the wrong bar. I needed to select 2 bars before, right? So this is what you need to do. Hold down shift and change your nudge value to 1 bar so that you can nudge 1 bar at a time. And then you can go up or down 1 bar at a time and move your selection to the right bar that you want. Once you're at the right bar, then leave your shift and then continue doing the plus or minus, and it will move the audio as well. If you are not using a full-size keyboard and you still want to use a nudge function, you can. So if you are on a laptop with a standard regular QWERTY size keyboard, you can use a greater than sign or the lesser than sign. That's the 2 keys after the letter M that you have on your keyboard to go to the left or to the right. The regular arrow keys are not going to work. So if you are using your regular keyboard, a smaller keyboard, you can use the greater than sign or the lesser than sign. That's your comma and your full stop keys that you have over here in order to move your audio or move your nudge on your timeline, on your track, right? Again, just a reminder, the grid value and the nudge value are completely independent. They have nothing to do with each other, so please do not get confused with that, right? You can change your grid value as well to show you something completely different. So even though your main time scale is set to bars and beats, you can choose your grid value to be completely different. So if you wanted to see time code or you wanted to see minutes and seconds, you can do that as well. But if you say follow main time scale, Pro Tools will always follow whatever time scale you have chosen as your main time scale, right? So if you change your main time scale to be time code, Pro Tools will automatically change the grid value to show you your time code. Cool? So that is nudge. When it comes to editing your audio, there are some basic stuff, right? So you can cut, copy, paste. If you don't know cut, copy, paste in today's day and age, you are in serious trouble. The shortcuts are the same for every application, right? So you can do Command X for cut or Command C for copy, Command V for paste, and Pro Tools will paste your audio as well. You can obviously use the menu. You can obviously use the menus as well. So you can come up to the edit menu and you can say cut, copy from here as well. So if I wanted to do a cut from here and I wanted to paste it over here, I can place my edit cursor over there. I can come up to my edit menu and I can tell Pro Tools paste. And now my clip B has moved to this bar over here, right? You can make your cut copy can happen across multiple tracks as well. So let's say I wanted to select clip 1 and clip 2 at the same time, and I wanted to cut from here and I wanted to paste it 2 bars later. That means I wanted to paste it at bar 102 instead of bar 100. I have to make sure, because I have selected 2 clips on 2 different tracks, I have to make sure that my edit cursor is also on 2 tracks before I do paste. That means before I do Command V. If my edit cursor is not on 2 tracks, let's say my edit cursor is only on 1 track, when I do paste, Pro Tools will paste only 1 track or 1 clip of audio of the 2 that it did copy, right? So always make sure that your edit cursor is blinking on both the tracks if you are making multiple selections and multiple copy paste, and then do Command V so that Pro Tools will be able to paste the audio across both the tracks, right? It will maintain its position wherever it was. So even if it was not touching each other, if it was 2 separate clips, it will maintain the distance across in between these 2 clips when you copy and paste from one side to another side, right? You can even clear it. So if this is audio that you don't like, you don't want it, you can just press the delete key on your keyboard. Or once you make a selection, you can come up to the edit menu and you can tell Pro Tools clear. Or when I say delete, I mean the backspace key for Windows users, right? Or the delete key as well. There is a delete on the full-size keyboard as well. But on the Mac, the backspace is called delete. So you can press the delete key and Pro Tools will get rid of the audio for you over there, right? Let's see what else. So we saw cut, copy, paste, clear. You can even duplicate your audio clip. So if I had, let's say this is a particular loop that I like over here. Let's just play this. Cool. Let's say I like this loop. I want to have this loop again for 3 more times. There are 2 ways in which you can loop a clip. I can come up to the edit menu over here and I can tell Pro Tools duplicate my clip, or I can use a shortcut which is Command D. So once you have made a selection, if I press Command D or Control D, Windows users, if I press Command D, it will place the audio right at the end of the first clip itself, right? So you can choose to choose to make your loops in that way. Let's undo. There is another way. If you know for a fact that this is a loop that you want for the next 100 bars of your selection, I can come up to my edit menu and I can tell Pro Tools, repeat this audio for me, please. And when it does that, I can tell Pro Tools how many times I want this audio to be repeated. So if I want this particular loop to repeat 100 times, I say okay, and boom, Pro Tools is now repeating my audio or looping my audio 100 times on this particular track, right? I'm just going to undo that. We don't really need it. Cool. The shortcut, there is a shortcut obviously for repeating your audio. So once you make your selection, the shortcut is Option R or Alt R if you're a Windows user. And you can tell Pro Tools how many times you want to repeat this particular operation or this particular selected loop, and Pro Tools will do the needful for you, right? So that is how you can do basic editing stuff. You can even cut, copy, paste. It doesn't have to be a full clip. It can be even a part of a clip. So if I wanted only these 3 beats, let's go to slip mode. If I wanted only these 3 beats from this particular audio clip, I could just do a cut. And when I do a cut, Pro Tools will automatically make, 2 more sub clips from this whole clip over here. And then I can go wherever I want and I can say paste, and Pro Tools will paste my audio clip for me over there, right? So the minute I made this cut over here, you will see the loop 2 automatically got 3 subclips over here now. So there's loop 202, there's 203, and there's 204, right? So 3 subclips got made when I did my cut command over here. Similarly, you can do copy as well. It doesn't have to be a cut. You can even copy and then paste, and it will create a copy of the selected region and paste it wherever you want it to paste, right? So these are some of the basic editing commands that you will obviously use in Pro Tools. If you notice, I have always been in my Smart Tool, and I really recommend everyone get used to the Smart Tool because it's just much easier in order to click, select, navigate, move, do everything that you want within your Pro Tools timeline. There are ways in which you can just cut your audio clip as well. So suppose I wanted to cut clip B right in the middle over here. I can place my edit cursor right in the middle of clip B. If you wanted to make sure you are in the middle, you can say grid. I'm going to increase my grid so that we can actually see a little bit better over here. There we go, more lines. So I'm going to click again over here right in the middle of clip B, and I can tell Pro Tools to cut the audio directly over there. There are 2 shortcuts that will actually allow you to do this, and a menu option, obviously. So I can come up to my edit menu and I can tell Pro Tools to separate the clip at the selection, which is Command E. So if I press Command E on my keyboard, Pro Tools is going to cut my clip from, my clip B is going to get 2 subclips, clip B01 and B02. The other shortcut, instead of doing Command E, is to press the B key only. So if I just press B, it's basically doing the same thing for me, right? So I can cut my audio. So 2 keyboard shortcuts, Command E or just the letter B. Again, a quick reminder, if you want your letter B to work, your command focus or your keyboard focus, which is this small A to Z button that we have right up here in the corner, that needs to be on. If this is not on, your keyboard shortcuts will not work. There are a couple of other ways in which we can actually separate our audio as well, or cut up our audio. Let's find this particular clip over here. I'm going to select this 3-bar loop that I have, right? I can come up to Pro Tools, to my edit menu over here, and under separate clip, I can tell Pro Tools to cut up this particular audio clip based on the grid or based on my transients. If I select based on the grid, Pro Tools is going to chop up this audio file based on the grid lines that are passing through it. Which means now, because I'm in my 1/8 grid, I'm going to get way too many clips. Let's just go and select on grid over here. And Pro Tools will ask you, do you want to leave a little bit of buffer space before and after? I'm going to say 0 for now. I don't need it. When I say OK, look, all of a sudden, Pro Tools has made so many audio clips from that one particular clip for me, right? It's cut it up based on the grid lines that I see in my session. The other alternate is to actually cut it up based on the transient. So I did an undo. I'm going to come back to separate clip, and I'm going to tell Pro Tools to cut up this audio clip based on the transient. That means wherever it sees an attack sound, even if it is small, wherever it sees an attack sound, cut the audio at that particular point, cut the clip at that particular point, and make a new sub clip, right? So subset clip. So again, it's going to ask me pre-separate amount. I'm going to say no, say okay. And now if you look really carefully, it has not cut up my audio on the grid, but instead it has cut up my audio wherever it sees a transient. I can select any of these transients and just play it. So if I click on this particular clip and I press play, I should hear just one beat. Like that. I can delete individual beats if I wanted. So if I wanted to delete these beats just to make it a different kind of a loop, and now press select all of these again and press play. And it's going to loop, right? So when you do a cut by transient, it allows you to actually select individual drums because it's a drum track, right? So you can perform this operation on any track that actually has transients. I do know people who use this method if they want to just replace some of the drums. Like if I wanted to put a different kind of a kick sound over here now at this point where I deleted the two drum sounds, I could do that if I wanted, right? So that's one of the reasons why people like to use this particular function. So I can separate my audio clips based on my transients. What if after I do all of this, I don't like it? How do I come back? Obviously, yes, I can undo. That's one of the right ways to do it. You should undo. But what if I close my session and come back tomorrow? I can't undo what I did yesterday. So Pro Tools has a special function, right? Pro Tools has, again, another magic tool. I can select the audio clips before and after a particular section that I want Pro Tools to fix for me. I can come up to my edit menu and I can tell Pro Tools to heal separation. And when I do that, Pro Tools will magically rebuild the audio clip for me. Obviously, this is not the only way you can do it, right? You can actually just use your trim tool as well. So I'm going to zoom in at this particular clip so that we can actually see what's happening over here. And now if I bring my mouse to this corner over here, I get my trim tool. And if I click and I drag, Pro Tools will obviously bring back the audio clip the way it was, right? That's what the trim tool does. It can trim back the audio that you had edited. Always remember, editing in Pro Tools is non-destructive. That means even if you select a piece of audio and you press a delete key on your keyboard, you're not actually deleting the audio clip from your hard drive. If you recall from our previous videos, the only way to actually delete audio from your session and from your hard drive is if you take it out from your clips list and then you do a delete, not a clear, a delete. That's the only way you will not be able to recover any of the audio that you are working on. But otherwise, you can always recover the audio that you're working. So editing in audio is editing in Pro Tools is non-destructive, right? So don't be afraid to try anything. You can always undo. You can always come back. You can always untrim your audio. Speaking of trimming audio, like how I trimmed over here, if I wanted to trim from the other end, all I need to do is hold my Option key, right? So now you can see my trim icon over here. If I hold down the Option key, you will see that the icon just switched directions, which means now if I click and drag, Pro Tools is not going to trim from this side. It's going to trim from this side, like this, right? So it's basically trimming the left side, not the right side. right? So depending on where your trim tool is, you can just hold down the Option key and Pro Tools will start trimming from the other side. Why do you need this? Well, if you're working on a small clip like this, it's useless. But if you're working on a long track, let's say you listen to the entire vocals and you're right at the end of the session and you realize that, man, this entire singer is crap. I just like one word of this song. I don't like anything else, right? You can hold down the Option key and then trim at that particular point and it'll cut everything from that particular point till where your mouse is, right? There are other shortcuts as well. And I think this is actually not part of the 101, but I'll still show it to you. It's pretty cool. If, let's say, my clip starts over here and I want to cut off everything till this particular point, right? Obviously, I can use my trim tool and bring my mouse till here. But what if I don't want to do that? What if I place my edit cursor over here? I like this particular point. I want to cut everything from before till this particular point. I can come up to my edit window, edit menu. I can say trim clip and I can say start to insertion, right? Which means the start of the audio clip is going to move to where my insertion point is, which means where my edit cursor is, right? Or you can use a shortcut. Just press the letter A on your keyboard and Pro Tools will cut off everything from the beginning. Similarly, if I want to do it for the end, I just place my insertion point or my edit cursor where I want Pro Tools to end this particular audio clip and I press the letter S and Pro Tools will cut my audio from the end to that particular point. If you forget these shortcuts, obviously you can always go up to the edit menu, trim clip and say end to insertion and it's going to do the same. You could even make a selection, like now in this particular case, if I wanted only this part of my audio clip, I didn't want anything before or after, I can tell Pro Tools to trim the audio from both the sides and keep only this part of my audio clip. And you can do that by coming up to Edit, Trim Clip, and to Selection, or use the shortcut Command T, or if you're on Windows, Control T, right? So Command T is going to trim the audio clip and keep only the selection that you have. This is a really, really cool feature, and this is how you really quickly edit in Pro Tools. Again, if you want your S and your S and A shortcuts to work, your A for trim from the front and S to trim from the back, you have to have your command focus, your keyboard focus, this A to Z button that we see over here. This should be on. If this is not on, your shortcuts A, S is not going to work. By the way, if your command focus is on, you don't even have to press Command X or Command C or Command V when you're doing cut, copy, paste. You can just do X for copy, X for cut, C for copy, V for paste, and Pro Tools will do it for you. Similarly in Windows as well, right? So if you have your keyboard focus on, you don't need to do Control X for copy. Just do X and Pro Tools will copy for you, right? That's what the keyboard focus allows you to do. Allows you to focus, right? Cool. So that is how we trim our audio. Next, let's take a look at some fades, right? When we are working with clips, let's come back. Let's do it on these clips over here. When we are working with clips, we can do fade in, fade out for our audio clips that we have, right? So if we saw how to do it in a smart tool. A smart tool is smart. Allows you to just move your mouse to the top corner. I can click and drag. I get my fade in. I can come to the corner over here. I can click and drag. I get my fade out, right? If I have two clips, like over here, I have two clips. If I wanted to draw a crossfade, all I need to do is click and drag between two clips and I get to do my crossfade. There's one thing that you need to be aware of when you're working on crossfades though, right? I did a crossfade now over here on subset clips. It's not a whole audio clip, right? Let's take this example over here. I have clip 3 and clip 4. I'm going to use this as an example over here. I'm going to put myself in the grid mode just so that I can move this perfectly in time. There we go, right? So I have clip 3 and I have clip 4 over here. And I want, these are whole audio clips. How do I know they are whole audio clips? Well, they are written in bold in my clips list, right? So clip 3 and clip 4, they are whole audio clips as I see in my clips list, which means this is the entire clip, There's no audio, there's no extra data about this audio clip that's before or after. Nothing is hidden, right? If I try to draw a crossfade between these two clips like this using my Smart tool, right, Pro Tools is not going to be able to draw it. That is because there is nothing that it can crossfade, right? What do I mean by there's nothing that can crossfade? Firstly, you need to understand what happens when I do a crossfade. And for that to work, let's make a copy of this particular two clips that I have over here. I'm going to trim clip 3 and I'm going to trim clip 4. I'm going to make both of these just 1 bar long, right? So I have clip 3 over here, I have clip 4 over here, right? Now if I try to draw a crossfade between clip 3 and clip 4 over here, I will get a crossfade. You know why? Because there is information about clip 4 before the start of clip 4 itself. What is a crossfade? A crossfade means as one clip is fading out, the other clip starts to fade in. And you can see the fade out of clip 3 over here and the fade in of clip 4 over here. If you look really carefully, my clip 4 starts over here, but the fade in of clip 4 starts at this point. That means there is a region of clip 3 and clip 4 that are actually overlapping each other. That means there is audio underneath each of them, right? So let's bring this back up over here. Let's make another copy of this particular clip over here. So I have clip 3 over here. I have clip 4 over here. I'm going to bring this down to this track over here just so that we can see. And here it shows you how the crossfade is actually happening, right? Now, when I actually started my crossfade over here, you will see that there was the clip 4 started at this point over here and clip 3 ended at this point over here. So when I did my crossfade from here to here, there has to be audio underlying for the crossfade to actually happen. Now, with this clip 3 and clip 4, with the purple clip 3 and clip 4, that underlying audio is not there. So, which is why when I try to do a crossfade over here now, Pro Tools is not going to be able to draw the crossfade because there's no audio that is overlapping in these two clips. There has to be some audio that overlaps. If there's absolutely no audio that overlaps, Pro Tools will not be able to draw the crossfade for you. So if I trim any of these clips now, even though I'm trimming clip 3 by 1 bar, and I'm going to move it over here, I know clip 3 is actually 2 bars, which means if I try to open up clip 3 over here, it's going to open up all the way till this point over here, right? Let's try it. Let's see it. See, there is so much of clip 3 that actually overlaps. So if I try to draw a crossfade now, Pro Tools will be able to draw a crossfade, but it will pop up an error. It will tell me I'm trying to draw a crossfade, but there's not enough audio in one of the clips for me to draw a perfect crossfade. That's because there's no extra audio in clip 4. There is extra audio from clip 3, but there's no extra audio from clip 4. That means clip 3 can fade out perfectly fine, but clip 4, there's nothing to fade in. So it's asking me, do you want to change where you put this crossfade? Can I move the crossfade and put it at a different place where there is enough overlapping audio? Which means at the start of clip 4, it's going to put the crossfade for me. So if I say adjust bounds, I will see that now my crossfade has started where clip 4 originally is, and my fade out for the crossfade fade out for clip 3 has started where the audio actually overlaps. So if there's no overlapping audio, it's not possible to put a crossfade. So if you try to do a crossfade in Pro Tools and Pro Tools does nothing, that means there's absolutely nothing that overlaps in that particular audio clip, right? You have to have at least a little bit of audio overlapping above each other in order for a crossfade to work perfectly. This is how you do it using your mouse, using your Smart tool. If you don't want to use your Smart tool and you want to use your menus, you can do that as well. So if I select this particular piece of my audio, the end of this audio clip, and I want to put a fade out, I can come to my edit menu, I can come all the way down to fades, and I can tell Pro Tools create a fade. and Pro Tools will pop up a window for me and it'll ask me, okay, what kind of fade do you want? I can choose whether I want a really gradual fade, I want a flat fade. This, I believe, is what the standard is. By default, you will get a flat fade. Or do I want an ultra sharp fade as well? So you can choose what kind of a curve you want, what kind of a shape you want for your fade, right? So you can say, okay, and Pro Tools will draw your fade out. You can do the same for your fade in as well. So you can just select the beginning of your clip. You can go back to your edit menu, come down all the way to fades and say create fade, or use a shortcut, which is Command F. There we go. You get the same function, right? I'm going to say okay, and now I have my fade in over here as well. Similarly for crossfades, if I did not have this crossfade and I wanted my audio to crossfade from here to here, make your selection, do Command F, and you can tell Pro Tools what kind of a crossfade you want, and Pro Tools will draw the crossfade for you. If you think your crossfade position is not right, you can use your grabber tool and click and drag to move your crossfade to try a different location as well. Similarly, in your trim tool, using your trim tool, you can even trim the size of your fade out or your fade in by just bringing your mouse to the top half of your fade out or fade in and then clicking and dragging it in or out, right? There are, of course, keyboard shortcuts to do your fade in, fade out as well. So let's take, for example, over here, if I wanted my fade in to be from the start of my audio clip till this particular point, till this particular edit cursor point that I have on this clip, all I need to do is press the letter D on my keyboard and Pro Tools gives me a fade in. If I wanted a fade out at this from this particular point till the end of this clip 4, I press G and Pro Tools will do a fade out, right? Again, this will work only if you have your command focus on, otherwise it does not work, right? No command control, just D for fade in, G for fade out. And if it's crossfade, it's the one in between, F, right? So I can make my selection over here and I do F, and again, obviously because this is a whole audio clip, I can say adjust bounce and Pro Tools will draw the fade, crossfade for me. So this is how you do your fades. Again, multiple ways. You can use the edit menu, go to edit, go all the way down to the end to the fades, or you can use a shortcut Command F, or you can just use your keyboard, D for fade in, F for crossfade, G for fade out. It's the 3 letters right next to A and S, right? So D, fade in, crossfade, fade out. So that's how it is positioned on your keyboard. Or use your smart tool. That's the easiest way, right? Just bring your mouse up here, click and drag, and boom, your fade in, fade out. Everything is really, really simple using your smart tool, right? If you make a mistake, Pro Tools allows you to make 64 mistakes, which means you can undo 64 times. So you can keep doing Command Z, Command Z, Command Z, Command Z 64 times, and Pro Tools will not have a problem. Or if you're on Windows, it's Control Z, right? Or obviously you can use the edit menu by coming up to the menu over here and saying undo over here. Pro Tools even shows you everything that you can undo in a window, and it's called the undo history window. So I come up to my window menu because it's a window, and I come all the way down to undo history, and now Pro Tools can show me everything that it can undo. These are all the different things that I have done till now. And the line over here is basically, that's where I am. That's the indication of where I am. So if I wanted to undo one step, all I need to do is click on it and Pro Tools will undo that particular step that I did. If I wanted to undo the last couple till this clear command over here, I just click on it and Pro Tools will undo everything till that point. If I realize, I made a mistake, it should be this clear, not that clear, I can click on it and Pro Tools will redo everything till that point again. If you want to undo all, you can do that. Just come all the way to the top and then click on the first one. Pro Tools will undo everything. Or you want to redo all, come back to the bottom of the list and click on the last one and Pro Tools will redo everything till that point. You can change the number of undos you can have in Pro Tools. If you go to your setup and preferences under your editing tab, you will see over here that Pro Tools gives you the option to change the levels of undo that you have. The reason this option exists is because every time you perform an operation, Pro Tools has to remember what it needs to undo. And this remembering happens in your RAM, in your computer RAM. So if you're using a computer which has a little bit of less RAM, you can have a little bit of processing problems, right? So the one way to free up your RAM is to tell Pro Tools, okay, I'm a really good audio engineer. I don't need you to remember 64 things. Just remember the last 10 things. It's okay. So Pro Tools will keep only the last 10 actions that you have done in the RAM, and everything else is gone. But if you're working on a system which has at least 16 gigs of RAM, 64 should be fine. You don't need to change that. But if you do want to change it, don't make it 0. Don't make it 1. That's a foolish thing to do. So don't keep it that low. I would not go below 32, to be really honest with you, right? And that is only and only if you're using a computer which has only like 8 gigs of RAM. 16 gigs is recommended, is the minimum requirement actually, if you want to smooth sailing on your Pro Tools system. 32 gigs is great. So if you have 16 gigs or more, leave it at 64 levels of undo. That's the default that there is, right? So in your undo history window, Pro Tools also gives you 2 more options. I can come up to the small pop-up menu over here and I can tell Pro Tools to undo all at one time. Or I can even tell Pro Tools to clear my undo queue. What does clear undo queue do? Clear undo queue, basically, it's like flushing out your RAM, right? So if you think you're done with your session, you're perfect, everything is done, everything is good, but now you want to render the song, you want to bounce out the song, but you need to free up your RAM a little bit because you're using too much of auto-tune, your singer sucks, and you really need your CPU power and your RAM in order to process your plugins. You can come here and tell Pro Tools to undo your, clear your undo queue. And when you do this, obviously, I can't undo now, right? I can't say, oh no, it's okay, let's bring it back. No, it's done. Once you flush the things in the toilet, it's not going to come back. I hope it doesn't come back, right? So this acts like a flush. So it flushes out your RAM, so nothing is in your RAM now. All of a sudden, my RAM is free to do my audio work for me, right? If after you do all of this, if suddenly you feel, I really need to go back, I really need to undo, then, well, if you have not saved your session, you can close your session and come back and open the session again. Or Pro Tools gives you the same thing. In the file menu, there is an option that says revert to saved. So when you do revert to saved, Pro Tools will basically go back to the last time you did Command S. It could be today when you open the session, or if you did not do Command S at all, it would be what the session was when you started working on that session today, right? So if I say revert now, Pro Tools will close my existing session and it will bring back the session, bring back my session to what it was when I last did Command S, which looks like not too long ago in this case over here. If this also does not work and you really need to go back to a session from before, well, you could use your session backups. If you remember, Pro Tools automatically keeps backing up the session for you from time to time. So I could come back to my file menu, I can say open session, and I can tell Pro Tools to look inside my session file backups. So I'm going to go to the session file backups, and I can see that Pro Tools has made all of these backups for me today. The earliest backup was today at 3:41 p.m. So I'm going to say, okay, that's probably the one that I want. So I'm going to click on that and say open. Pro Tools will close this session and reopen the session for me as it was at 3:41 p.m. When you do this, Pro Tools will put a .recovered name to that particular file. So if this is what you want, it's very highly recommended that you click on the file menu and you do a save as, and instead of recovered, you say original and say save, right? So that's how you can recover your sessions that you saved at any time. So you can use the undo history window, but if you clear out your undo queue, if you flush out your RAM, then the only way to get back to your session is to use one of the automatically created session file backups for you, right? So that is it. That is chapter 9. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Cheers. See you later. Bye.